Who can do something for me? Okay, so this one, two people. If you want to volunteer, fine. Just let us know who can do two things. I want to see how far you can go in mentioning this following. For example, my name is Victor. Father's name is Husseini. Husseini's father's name is Kura. Kura's father's name is Jok. Jok's father's name is Ngo. Ngo's father's name is Nza. The father's name is Jom. Jom's father's name is Jara. Jara's father's name is Fai. So you see, no, I missed one. Okay, 9. I have mentioned 9. 9. Need 2 people. You will tell us your name, and your father's name is the father of your father, and let's see how far you can go. Maybe you reach 20. I don't know. Yes.
Yes.
Who is volunteering? Who is going to volunteer, please? Yeah, let's see who is volunteering. You can just raise up your hand and we'll point you. Let's see how far. Oh, Feleke Fantu. Yes, please.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank
Unmute your microphone. Yes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Falake. My father's name is Fantu.
Okay.
Fantu's father's name is Ashango.
3.
Ashango's father's name is Alasso.
4.
Alasso's father's name is Amado.
5.
Amado. Yes, Amado's name is Azge.
6.
Azge's father's name is Ala.
7.
Ala's father's name is Aika.
8.
Oh, this is the one.
Great. 8. Yes.
8.
Who else can help us do that, please? Yes. There's no any other hand up. Oh no. Are you afraid? Don't be. Hey, we need one more volunteer, please. One more. Don't be afraid. Thank you very much, Feleke. You got to 8. It's a beautiful one.
Thank you.
Yes. Martha Banga, your microphone is on. You want to do it? They say what a man can do, a woman can do better. So, yes, the floor is yours. Hey, is Martha there? Martha Banga, are you there?
Yes, from Goma one is going to try.
Okay, who is that, please? Great, let's see. We are listening.
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yes, my name is Bayu.
Okay.
Bayu's father name is Belihu.
Okay, 2.
Belihu's father name is Bakedan.
3.
Bakedan's father name is Bambo.
4.
Bambo's father name is Bache.
5.
Bache's father name is Dake.
6.
Dake's father name is Dawe.
7.
Dawe's father name is Shok.
8.
Father name is Ona.
9.
I finished. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Please let's clap for him. He reached 9. That's beautiful. Okay, can't a lady help us? At least one lady should help us. Or Gezahen, you want to do?
No, the lady from Arab is raising her
Oh,
hand.
interesting. Please
So,
go ahead. Let's listen to a lady.
አንቺን ነው እጅ አንስተሻል። ማይክ ሚውት ሆኗል።
Okay, is that a pink?
Okay, let me try up to 3, maybe.
Oh, okay. Let's see how it goes.
Let's see. My name is Candice,
Okay,
and my father name is Israel,
2,
and my child father name is Kuma.
3,
Kuma's father name is
4,
Ale. Ale's father name is
5.
Ike.
Oh, okay. Interesting. By the way, thank you. Thank you for trying. What do you see from this thing that has just happened now? In a class of more than 60 people, only 3 people had the courage of naming their name. By the way, let me give you my secret. It's easy for me to recount these names because I come from a royal family. You know, royal family have those records kept. But it's a problem in Africa. We lose track of our histories too easily. The Westerners, they write what they call memoirs. We in Africa, we use what is called oral tradition. But you see, the problem is because we have been exposed to Western life, we dropped our oral tradition and we didn't adopt the memoir. So because we don't know anything, we don't know much about our parents, what will we tell our children? What will we tell them? So we have been weak, especially when it relates to history, and it's a problem. I'm challenging you to go do your research. Try to know your roots. Where are your people from? Is there anything in your family that has happened? Are there traits in your family? And put all of these things together. When did Christianity enter your family? Who was the first person to receive Christ in your family? Yes. Like in my case, my father born again, but he was not a serious Christian. He was drinking and still doing some strange things. But then my mother came. My mother comes from a godly home, and she influenced him, and he changed. So that is how. So anytime I meet ladies, I tell them, hey, you can change things, huh? It's possible. You can pray. My mother prayed. It was difficult for her because her husband was a soldier, a military officer, but she changed him. And we were raised. So you see, some of our history can help us to process certain things. So I challenge you, next time we pick someone, who knows, someone can give us 20 generations. Amen? It's possible. Someone can give us 20 generations. That's how beautiful history can be. So let's see what we've got for today. And let me share my screen. Okay. Perspective, sources, and demands. Now, first, is there any African church history to learn? Like I had mentioned, even from the illustration that we had, we Africans have been really, really lazy when it comes to history. That's the truth. Unfortunately, because ours was transmitted through oral tradition. And the oral tradition, a father will tell his son, and his grandchildren will also be listening. When the father comes, the children will now tell their own children, and their other children will be listening. So there is a circle of listening twice from 2 generations. So, and that's why they were keeping things in their head. But today we claim we are educated. And even though we claim we're educated, we do not write memoirs like the West. And we also do not do the oral tradition. We've abandoned it. So, although the existence of African history is taken for granted today, it was not the case 60 years ago. Listen to the views of 2 prominent personalities. One is this man, Hugh Trevor. He's a professor of history at Oxford University. He was pestered by his students to teach them African history. But he expressed his view in his book, The Rise of Christian Europe, which he published in 1964. This is what he said. He said, perhaps in the future, there will be some African history to teach, but at present there is none, or very little. There's only the history of the Europeans in Africa. The rest is largely darkness, and darkness is not a subject for history. Because Africans have not been writing. Africans have not been writing. There is very little to know. The things about Africa are the writings of the Europeans when they came to Africa. So he's saying there's only the history of the Europeans in Africa. The rest is largely darkness, and darkness is not a subject for history. So as you can imagine, this was raised a storm of controversy from scholars of African history at the time. And that is the truth. Then the vice president of Kenya, 1967 to 78, and he became president 78 to 2002. His name is Daniel Arap Moi. He was addressing the Historical Association of Kenya in August 1973, and he made this remark. He said the task which now faces Kenyans, and of course we're talking about Africa, Kenyan historians, and those of the whole African continent, is to utilize their understanding of both European and African societies to recreate a new African history. So it's very, very possible that even in this class, we're going to have people who would be intentional in writing the history of Christianity, maybe in their hometown, maybe among their people tribe, maybe in their families. Yes, people who can name generations. All it takes is some investigations. And to gather what we can gather. So that's very, very important. So Daniel Arap Moi paid a glowing tribute to the association for enabling the country to move away from traditional colonial ideas, which maintained that the African had no history before the advent of Europeans. So Moi went on, he said, in order to have the stable, progressive society that is required, there is the need for a unifying factor in the nation. Other nations have over the centuries practiced what is called national identity to instill pride and love for one's country by teaching national history. Because according to Moi, history should serve to promote the Christian context today. We are Christians, and we said this is an African moment, a moment where Africa leads the world in Christianity. And it is true. Africa is the country with the highest number of people who identify as Christians. So now, how do we lead when we don't have a history, where we don't have a substantial history, where we cannot carefully trace our development? Remember the adage I quoted earlier. I said, if you don't know where you're coming from, how can you know where you're going? So Trevor Rupert is not necessarily a racist or a colonialist. He was rather a prisoner of an essentially European approach to history. He was trained in a method which relied heavily on written documents for the construction of history. He seemed unable to appreciate that history can exist without them. He ignores the value of African oral records and archaeology, and even underestimates the written record that do exist on pre-colonial Africa. But most importantly, a Eurocentric view of history is obsolete. Now, yeah, Trevor did say that, but the truth is, let's be honest, if we were to use this class as a sample, we only had one person who could name up to 9 generations. We have another person named 8 generations. We have another who did 5. The rest are not didn't say anything. We can't say they didn't know, but at least they have not spoken. So you see, how much more of knowing the history of what happened in their community 80 years ago, 200 years ago. So there's only the history of Europeans in Africa. If full reliance was placed on the written document of 19th and 20th century Africa, nearly all led by white travelers, missionaries, soldiers, and the administrators, a totally one-sided view of African history will result. If we allow it, we will continue. I told you I come from West Africa and we use a lot of adage. There is an adage that unless the animals begin to write the story, every story of animal encounter with humans will always portray the hunter as. Do you get what that means? Most stories, unless animals begin to write stories, every story about the encounter between animal and humans will always portray the hunter as the victorious. When you see people write stories, you hear, oh, he killed a lion, he killed a leopard, he killed a bear, he killed a rhino, he killed this. Oh, he's victorious, because it's humans that are writing. But if animals were to start writing, the story would be different. What just happened? I think something just happened. I'm coming. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I saw something on my screen. I wanted to be sure what it is. So if we keep, if the animals don't write, so in the same way, all that the things that we keep seeing will be written in favor of the Western. Start considering researching and writing. So since these documents almost all reflect in a lesser or greater extent the myth of white superiority, it is not surprising that the likes of Trevor Roper dismisses traditional African life as without historical significance. Notice that a faulty historical method can lead to wide and unbalanced conclusion. Now, one days we can record. We can record. These days we can record. And I think that's one thing I'm even trying to do now. These days we can, it's to buy a recorder. These days we can record. We can gather information. We can ask people questions and gather information, synthesize them, Then synthesize them, how do I put it now? Synthesize them, then present them as a material for other people to have access to it. So it's very, very important that we take this seriously. That we take this seriously. So now, Moy's main point is essentially true. There is no doubt that in the years since Trevor Roper wrote, there have been remarkable advances in African history. Once the method of combining oral and written document with archaeology has been understood, the yield is rich. Every year, our knowledge increases. Notice too that Moy emphasizes that a new African history will draw on African and European sources. Authentic or objective history is free from any kind of racial bias. So, but Moy's contribution illustrates also a different danger. He seems to think that history should play its part in nation building. It is quite true that in the past, history has been used in this way by patriotic people of every country. That is precisely why a lot of historical myth-making exists. The student of history must be on his or her guard for the truth when this process occurs. He or she must be doubly cautious when it is urged by politicians. We're not trying to paint a picture, especially in the context of Christian history. We're not trying to paint a picture to make Christianity look superior or to make our people look superior or any. Caution must be taken so that we present the truth. And now in the case of Moy, Moy was a politician himself. And of course, his goal will be political. So history has too many examples of politicians of all races, nations, and ideologies using history for political ends, for the historian to be complacent. So either history is an independent discipline pursuing its own objective, or it is a weapon of or captive to politics. So the true historian will search for any ulterior motive in the use of history. Now, back to our question. Is there any African church history to learn? So our answer to the basic question must be that there is indeed a great deal of African history to be learned, and a great deal yet to be discovered. Our subject is in an exhilarating state of flux. There is so much to learn. There is so much that is needed. So that is the response to our question. So it is possible to identify two main approaches to the study of African church history. Two main sources. Sorry, I'm trying to close this window. Right. All right. It is possible to identify two main approaches to the study of African history from a metropolitan perspective. The missionaries and their Western supporters initiated the subject and thus gave rise to this approach. It is focused on European strategies for the planting of Christianity in Africa. We do know that Christianity had been in Africa for long, but it didn't expand. And then, even there, when Islam came, it wiped away everything. So it wiped away everything in many places. There are very places where Christianity survived. Where Christianity survived. So, in that case, when the Europeans reintroduced Christianity in Africa, they reintroduced it with, of course, how they went about doing it. So how they came and they planned the things they document. So the heroic missionary have to implement this plan. So they failed to give full recognition to African participation in the evangelization of the continent. Like the early colonial history regards Africa as a stage on which Europeans of all kinds played out their interest. So while they did all these things, they were only looking at what they were doing, not what was going on. Whilst, of course, there have been a lot of Africans who worked with them. There are those who were converts, and those converts, they themselves participated in reaching to their people. They themselves participated and they did a lot. But now these records cannot be complete because it's the missionary only chronicles what he has done, mostly as a report to the sponsors. So then the nationalist perspective. Now in the 1960s, Africans started responding to the quote-unquote metropolitan approach. That is, they seen that from them, the missionaries were biased. So they started doing something like, hey, no, we need to write our own history. And in accord with a new emphasis on African initiative, historians of the development of Christianity in Africa, they began to explore ways in which African perceptions and reactions conditioned the pattern of mission expansion, the extent to which evangelization was an accomplishment of African catechists rather than Europeans, etc. So nationalist historians delighted in showing that missionaries were no less racist than other Europeans and that they were intimately linked to imperial pressure and colonial governments. That is, some of these missionaries, some had some influence of the colonialists. Well, there are a lot of explanations around that, and I hope we will come to talk about that. I will break it down to clarify. So the nationalist perspective has emphasized the extent to which mission activity has transformed traditional patterns of African life by undermining the cultural self-confidence of their convert and by generating an educated and modernizing elite, which eventually brought down the colonial system. So, of course, these are some of the so the nationalist posture towards the missionary presence has thus been ambivalent. On the one hand, its practitioners have been bitterly critical of missionary acts, have deeply regretted aspects of the world they have lost, partly through mission activities. But on the other hand, nationalist historians regard mission-inspired effort at modernization as fundamentally progressive and believe that missionary unwittingly contributed to political independence. Now, maybe before we go further, let me clarify something here. It is true that some of these Western missionaries did certain things that they got wrong, but they did help. They did help. Many of them intentionally trained people who fought for their independence. Many of them even fought those who are abusing their rights here, abusing their power here as abusing their power as colonial officers. So some of them reported and even took some people. So it's not right to assume that all the white nations they are these, they are that. No, some of them made mistakes. Some of them, even those who made the mistakes, were sincere and honest mistakes. They were not imperialism, they were rather honest mistakes, which anyone can make. So more recent research has added new items to the historiographical agenda. Among these, the most exciting has been that of the African religious history. So nationalist historians had largely ignored the mission-African interaction at the level of religious encounter. Yes, it is widely known that the expansion of Christianity in Africa had important popular religious dimension. So occasionally, both individuals and societies found in the immigrant religion symbol ideas to meet old needs, which could facilitate their adjustment to a new and wider world, increasingly impinging upon them. So the nationalist analysis of mission history is being refined in other ways too. Case study research is revealing a more subtle and highly differentiated picture of interaction with colonial authorities. So that interaction takes place, well, proving that God is sovereign. Come what may, God has a way he accomplishes his purpose. So the relationship between mission and colonial institutions varied widely, depending on the particular mission and issues involved, as well as the nature of the colonial situation. Let's give example. The subservient relationship of Catholic mission to Belgian authorities in the Congo, for example, was a very different matter from the antagonistic stand of German Protestant mission towards their own government in Tanganyika or the Cameroons. You see, in Tanganyika or the Cameroons, some of the missionaries, the German missionaries, supported whatever the German government is doing without a question. But on the other hand, the Catholic mission were against what they are, though they come from Belgium, they were against what the Belgian colonialists were doing under King Leopold. So basically, the relationship differ. There are also some places where missionaries threatened some people, even were brutal to some people, a kind of an imperialistic kind of mindset. But then there are other places where they're not like that. So sources, we want to look at sources. If you are writing history, and you want to write history, a key important thing is source. Source is, history is something that has happened or is happening. Now, and you want to present it to people as authentic. The number one thing is to identify your sources, because that's where people would ask questions. Now, what is source? Definition: a historical source is a place, person, or things from which historians get their information about the past. Place, person, or thing which historians get their information about the past. Sources only become historical evidence when they are used by historians to make a point. Therefore, historical sources are typically divided into two categories. There's what we call the primary source and the secondary source. Now, what is a primary source? Primary source are sources from the time period under consideration. First-hand testimony or direct evidence concerning the topic under investigation. So primary sources are the basic raw material of historical research, out of which historians reconstruct the past. They include eyewitness accounts of events. They include archival materials. They include minutes of council meetings, correspondence, and annual reports. Thus, primary sources must be critically assessed to establish their authenticity and reliability and value as evidence. The thing is, if these things are not done properly, then whatever lie, if someone has told a lie, or if someone had reported something wrongly, that very wrong report would then be propagated over the years to some extent that it becomes institutionalized. So because of that, the historian must be careful, and that resources must be critically assessed to establish their authenticity, reliability, and value as evidence. And that's primary source. Now, we have established earlier that primary source include oral tradition, eyewitness account, and the rest of them. So primary oral source, most traditional African society were non-literate. They borrowed the art of writing from the Europeans, who in turn borrowed it from the Semitic people. But some Semitic people live in Africa, notably North Africa and Ethiopia. And here, writing is as old as in Europe, if not older. So pre-literate African society show a major concern for history. Strong in African tradition is the idea of the continuous application of the past in everyday life, so that the living generation is linked between the dead ancestors and the yet unborn. Now, for example, in our villages, when something happens and you want to respond to it, these older people have a way of telling you, oh, you were little, or okay, before you were born, something like this had happened. This is how it was told. Now you see, you have the privilege of having a double information, an information of the past while you're watching the present. So, link between living and ancestor. So, for example, in matters of marriage, inheritance, and succession of office, there's a long African memory. State or government affairs were conducted with reference to memorized narratives transmitted verbally from generation to generation. Sometimes they're even used to propagate certain anger or retaliation, unfortunately. So now this was often the work of trained specialists. As for example, the growth of West Sudan and the Kadon Singer of Ashanti, the pre-colonial kingdom of Ashanti, Benin, and Buganda could not exist by the help of their chronicler and archivist, men whose duty it was to maintain the official record and transmit it intact to their successor, all done orally. So such oral records should be regarded as historical sources along with other sources. And even today, you want to gather information about your village. If you go to the elite, basically the elite would not be able to help you, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. So then trained specialists had done that for the success. So there have been some history keeping. Yeah, there was some history keeping. Indeed, it is now widely recognized that a major task of African historian is to use African memories of the narrator's own lifetime. Or the stories he or she has heard from the past. The historian must weigh this evidence and come to a sound and considered judgment. But in each case, oral tradition must be seen as a major source for African history. It helps to fill the very many great gaps in written record. There is a lot that have not been brought to the light because Africa is oral and the West are not oral. So to them, they probably think it implies a sense of sorry, I take it again. Indeed, it is now widely recognized that a major task of African historian is to use African memories of the narrator's own lifetime or the story he or she has heard from the past. And so the historian must weigh the evidence and come to sound and considered judgment. But in each case, oral tradition must be seen as a major source of African history. It helps to fill in the great gaps in written records. Written records have a lot of missing items, and also because the ones who did the writing did it just for the meantime. And so because of that, that needs to be taken into consideration. And we come to written sources. As already mentioned, some colonial African societies were literate. So in North Africa and Ethiopia, writing existed long before the arrival of Europeans. Arabic writing spread in West Africa many years before 1800. So beside African writings, there's a mass of material about Africa from non-Africans, from the Greek historian. For example, Herodotus in 5th BC upward. Now, there's a great deal of European writing in the colonial period and a few works from Africans in the 19th century, according to Samuel Ajay Crowther and Edward Bladen, James Johnson, all in West Africa. The establishment of African universities, especially from 1948, has produced distinctive schools of African history, including a notable one in Ibadan, Nigeria, which is now, of course, University of Ibadan, the premier university in Nigeria. So early European historians were amateurs, but during the 60 years, professionals have been attracted to African history. The use of European archives and other resources for light on Africa rather than on European Africa is an important development in written source usage. Now we come to archaeology. Archaeology is the art of digging the ground or studying of ancient artifacts to do anthropological study to know some things about the people. Archaeology. So they dig into places, they find information here and there. But then the study of material remains left by humankind in the past. By excavating historical sites and carefully examining the object discovered, we can learn much about the past. Egypt, with its exceptionally dry climate, has preserved many objects in its sand. Elsewhere in Africa, conditions for the preservation of the perishable object are not so good or favorable. Pottery and stone objects survive. And from this system of relative and absolute dating can be worked out. When these things are studied, through many things, some sculptures that have been planted on the ground, dating can be worked out. So robust information can be gathered even from that. So new method of radiocarbon dating have brought a great advance archaeological studies. All this add greatly to our common knowledge of African history. So it is now generally, sorry, is this discussion for us in the class? Okay. Are we together?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we are together.
So it is now generally recognized that a satisfactory reconstruction of the African past must depend upon a synthesis, like a combination of information from all available sources. The ones we can gather through oral, we gather. The one we can gather through writing archives, or even the ones which the Europeans documented, because they tried, at least they documented, the missionaries, or even the colonialists. We can as well go there and gather. I just know that we have so many resources to use, unless we don't want to use them. So all sources are very, very important. All sources are very important. And so any question? Any question? No question?
There is a question, actually. I
Okay.
raised my hand.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see it.
Okay. My question is, Ethiopia is one of the African nations that have its own literature history, and there are so many books which is not in the way they were writing, but those literatures most of the time we find in the Western library and the Western the purchasing with low cost, and they make available in their library. So how can they say the Western historians that there is no how can they are just looting all the documents from different areas using the poverty of the people. So this is a difficult part of the situation. The other is, of course, there is not organized as a modern historian writings here and there. There is a